there is a quiet emptiness that moves with you, unnoticed by others, yet heavy in the chest. Not the gentle solitude that refreshes the mind, but the subtle ache of reaching for connection and finding only silence. Crowded streets, laughter echoing around you, yet somehow feeling invisible. Small joys are celebrated alone, disappointments are carried in secret. This is the landscape of those who have no friends, not by choice but circumstance, history, and the invisible weights of social expectation. The psychology behind this silence is intricate, shaped by early experiences, protective mechanisms, and adaptive patterns that quietly shape behavior. To understand it is to glimpse both the fragility and resilience of the human need for connection. It is a journey through absence, observation, and the deep, often unspoken rhythms of the heart. There is a certain weight to being unseen, not the gentle quiet of solitude chosen, but the heavy silence of absence, an emptiness that settles deep in the chest, as if the world continues around you while you are merely a shadow within it. You walk through crowded streets, past laughter and conversation, and yet no one reaches for you. Faces blur, words pass, invitations are offered to someone else, while your presence drifts unnoticed, almost as if you are already a ghost. It is in these moments that the mind becomes both witness and prisoner, cataloguing every small gesture, every overlooked glance, every tiny omission, until it seems there is nowhere left to turn. For those who live without friends, the experience is not a fleeting sadness. It is a persistent state of awareness. Birthdays arrive quietly, unmarked by voices of celebration. Weekends stretch endlessly, hollow and unmoored. The phone remains silent, its lack of pings an echo of isolation. The world is vibrant around them, yet they feel at the edge of its rhythm, perpetually out of sync with the social currents that guide others' lives. Even when smiles are shared, they are received like distant signals, meaningful in appearance, but hollow in resonance. Yet invisibility is not simply external, it penetrates the self. Without mirrors of friendship to reflect back the image of who they are, individuals often begin to question their worth. Every misstep in conversation, every hesitation, every moment of awkwardness is amplified. Internal dialogues become relentless, parsing the smallest detail for hidden meaning, rehearsing encounters that never occur, imagining friendships that feel just out of reach. In this space, the mind is alive, vibrant, and painfully aware. But it is also lonely. Paradoxically, the absence of friends heightens perception. Observing others, they notice subtleties overlooked by those surrounded by companionship. A smile that does not reach the eyes, a conversation half performed out of obligation, a gesture intended to impress rather than connect. Social dynamics unfold before them like patterns in a tapestry, intricate and often elusive. And yet, even with this awareness, there is no path to genuine connection. The world of friendship seems both desired and distant. Tangible and unattainable emotional experiences take on unusual textures. Joy becomes muted, a solitary candle flickering in a room of shadows. Sadness deepens, unshared, echoing endlessly against the walls of solitude. Anger turns inward, with nowhere to land, transforming into a quiet tension, a subtle ache that shapes posture, tone, and thought. Every feeling is amplified precisely because there is no one to share it with, no one to witness it, no one to help carry its weight. Over time, these emotions become a private landscape, rich, intricate, and fully internalized. Yet even in this quiet isolation, there is subtle resilience. To navigate a world designed for connection without participating fully is not weakness, it is adaptation. They learn the art of presence without expectation. They cultivate patience, observing interactions without intrusion. They endure the unspoken truth of being alone in a society that prizes togetherness. And while the loneliness can be profound, it is not devoid of insight. From the margins of human connection, one sees patterns that the crowded center cannot perceive. One learns the contours of social life, the fragility of trust, the complexity of intimacy, all from the outside looking in. This is the landscape of recognition, to see oneself as both part of and apart from the world, to understand the desire for companionship, and yet also to confront its absence. The weight of invisibility is tangible, yet it also shapes a mind attuned to subtleties, a heart capable of deep reflection, a spirit quietly resilient. Here begins the journey, not of immediate transformation, but of awareness, the path of understanding, of witnessing the self within the echo of absence, of tracing the quiet psychology of those who live without friends. The path to solitude rarely begins with a dramatic fracture. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, a series of small disconnections that gradually shape the mind's expectations of others. Childhood is often the first canvas for these quiet lessons. Perhaps it started with an invitation that never arrived, a secret that was shared when it should have been kept, a group that drifted away without explanation. Each minor betrayal leaves a trace, a micro scars that accumulate silently, shaping how the self perceives the world. The mind begins to recognize a pattern. Openness carries risk. Vulnerability invites disappointment. These early experiences lay the groundwork for what psychologists call social learning. A child who is excluded or overlooked does not simply forget. The brain adapts neural pathways, attuned to connection, begin to associate trust with pain, sharing with rejection. Protective mechanisms emerge naturally, not by conscious decision, but as survival. They whisper quietly, hold back, expect less, protect yourself. Over time, these silent directives harden into invisible barriers. The individual learns to navigate life with caution, interpreting delayed messages, fleeting gestures, or neutral expressions as subtle signs of disinterest. The origins of friendlessness are rarely singular. They intertwine with temperament, circumstance, and the subtle intricacies of personality. A naturally introspective child may find it harder to reach across social gaps. A sensitive soul may perceive slight misalignments as rejection. Even the context of family and schooling shapes these patterns. Parental expectations, peer hierarchies, and early friendships, or the lack thereof, serve as templates for social behavior. Over the years, these templates accumulate, forming a scaffold upon which all subsequent interactions are interpreted. Early experiences are not only formative, they are cumulative. One disappointment can ripple into another. An exclusion at 7 may echo in classrooms at 10, then again in adolescence, creating an intricate web of expectations and anxieties. The brain begins to anticipate rejection as inevitable. It rehearses social scenarios endlessly, imagining missteps, calculating outcomes, and creating elaborate mental scripts to avoid pain. Each rehearsal strengthens the mental circuits of caution, making spontaneous connection more difficult. This process also introduces a paradoxical intensity of desire. While experiences teach withdrawal, they also heighten longing. To be excluded, repeatedly overlooked or misunderstood instills a deep craving for authentic connection. The very absence of friendship sharpens its value. Individuals come to yearn not for mere companionship, but for resonance, a kind of connection that feels both safe and profoundly understood. This yearning shapes attention, memory, and perception, sensitizing them to nuances in others' behavior, both real and imagined. Protective mechanisms are not inherently negative. They are adaptive. They prevent further hurt. Yet over time, they become self-reinforcing. Hypervigilance, withdrawal, and guardedness, once shields, become walls. They filter the world, allowing only carefully curated interactions, often excluding genuine opportunities. Here lies the quiet cruelty of friendlessness. The very behaviors that once ensured safety now impede the heart's desire for connection. The mind is caught in a loop, simultaneously craving intimacy and guarding against it, oscillating between hope and hesitation. The roots of friendlessness extend beyond isolated experiences. They are interwoven with the human need for trust and validation, the delicate interplay of expectation and disappointment, and the subtle architecture of the developing self. The landscape is complex, layered, and deeply personal. Each individual's journey begins here, in the unseen fractures of early life, in the small betrayals and missed invitations, in the silent lessons that guide how they will relate, or not relate, to the world for years to come. Understanding these origins is the first step towards seeing not deficiency, but adaptation, not failure, but survival. When friendship is absent for long enough, the mind does not simply endure, it adapts. Neural pathways subtly reorganize, tuning themselves to an environment defined by solitude. Social cognition, the ability to read faces, gestures, and tones, grows quieter, less exercised, like a muscle left unused. The brain, deprived of habitual social interaction, becomes more attuned to patterns of caution and self-protection. Each glance, each tone, is scanned for hidden judgment. Hypervigilance emerges not from paranoia, but from necessity. In the absence of reliable companionship, every interaction becomes potentially hazardous. This adaptation is mirrored in the inner dialogue, which grows both vivid and complex. Thoughts that once flowed outward now circle inward, rehearsing past missteps and anticipating imagined slights. A single delayed message is magnified, every nuance analysed, conversations are replayed endlessly, gestures scrutinised for hidden meaning, while future interactions are planned with meticulous care, as though social encounters are exercises in survival rather than connection. This internalisation becomes both refuge and prison, a place where the self can act freely without judgment, yet one that isolates from the corrective feedback of actual social experience. Paradoxically, this heightened awareness coexists with a deep longing for connection. The very mechanisms that protect against rejection also prevent closeness. The individual knows in the deepest sense what a friendship could feel like, the warmth, the resonance, the silent understanding, but simultaneously fears the vulnerability it demands. Each step toward intimacy feels both necessary and perilous, a delicate negotiation between hope and apprehension. The mind oscillates between reaching out and withdrawing, creating a persistent internal conflict. Emotional regulation itself is reshaped by this isolation. Joy feels muted when there is no one to witness it. Sadness swells, often unchecked, because there is no shared vessel to carry it. Anger turns inward, recycled in endless self-reflection. Feelings are processed internally, without the mirror of friendship to reflect them back. The absence of social anchors can amplify perception, sharpening sensitivity to nuances in the environment, but also intensifying self-doubt. Every slight, perceived or real, is magnified, reinforcing the cycles of withdrawal. Yet within this paradox lies a form of resilience. The absence of external validation fosters self-reliance and introspection. The individual learns to navigate their inner landscape with precision, to understand their own emotions deeply, and to anticipate social dynamics from observation rather than participation. This analytical insight into human behavior is often remarkable. Subtle cues, shifts in group energy, and performative social masks are noticed and decoded with clarity. However, this skill carries a cost. Clarity becomes skepticism, observation becomes comparison, and understanding becomes a barrier to spontaneous connection. The duality of longing and fear creates a persistent tension, a psychological gravity that shapes perception, decision-making, and even memory. Memories of connection are treasured, yet revisited with caution. Imagined future friendships are both desired and rehearsed, constrained by an acute awareness of risk. Social interaction, when it occurs, is approached with measured precision, often appearing distant or guarded. This is not rejection by choice, but a protective choreography honed over years. Each gesture, each word, is filtered through the accumulated lessons of early disappointments, internal rehearsals, and emotional vigilance. The inner conflict of prolonged isolation is not merely a psychological curiosity, it is a lived reality, shaping the way time, experience, and human presence are interpreted. The mind adapts to protect the self, yet in doing so, it often magnifies the very solitude it seeks to survive. Understanding this adaptation is essential, for it illuminates not only the mechanics of isolation, but the profound paradox of human longing, the simultaneous craving for connection, and the instinct to guard against it. Here, the psychology of the friendless mind is revealed, complex, adaptive, and deeply human. There comes a quiet moment, often unheralded, when the weight of solitude shifts from burden to awareness. It is not a dramatic revelation, but a gentle recognition. The patterns that once constrained movement in the social world can be observed, understood, and met with compassion. The mind begins to see its own protective mechanisms not as failings, but as adaptive responses born from experience. Each hesitation, each withdrawal, is no longer a mark of inadequacy, but a story of survival, a record of resilience cultivated over years of navigating a world that did not always provide safety or understanding. Self-awareness becomes the first step toward integration. Reflection, previously a source of rumination, transforms into a tool for insight. Thoughts are observed without judgment. Rehearsed interactions are revisited with gentle curiosity rather than harsh critique. Patterns of hypervigilance are acknowledged. The tendency to read too much into delayed responses, to anticipate rejection, to minimize one's own value. By simply noticing these tendencies, the mind loosens its grip. Awareness itself becomes a balm, a subtle correction to cycles that once felt inescapable. With this awareness comes cautious engagement. Small acts of connection, a brief conversation, a shared laugh, a moment of mutual attention, are approached deliberately, yet without the heavy rehearsal that once dominated every interaction. The individual learns to balance vigilance with openness, to test the waters of trust without abandoning their own boundaries. Each social encounter becomes a practice, an experiment in gently reclaiming the rhythms of connection. The fear of exposure remains, but it no longer dictates every move. The paradox of longing and hesitation begins to resolve into a softer equilibrium. The process of integration is gradual, layered, and uniquely personal. Friendlessness and solitude are no longer seen as deficits, but as part of a nuanced internal landscape. In their absence, an extraordinary capacity for observation, empathy, and introspection has developed. These qualities, once isolating, now become bridges, pathways that can guide toward meaningful connection when it is safe and authentic. The individual begins to understand that friendship is not an all-or-nothing phenomenon. It can be nurtured slowly, carefully, in alignment with one's own rhythms and emotional readiness. Healing is not the erasure of pain, but its transformation into perspective. Memories of exclusion, betrayal, and missed opportunities remain, but their power diminishes. They are integrated into a broader understanding of self and others, serving as guides rather than obstacles. The past is no longer a chain, but a map, illustrating the contours of vulnerability, resilience, and human complexity. The emotional intensity that once spiraled inward now finds its place within a measured awareness, allowing both solitude and social interaction to coexist with balance. By the close of this reflection, the individual discovers something profound. Solitude is not synonymous with deficiency. Friendlessness is not a flaw. They are, instead, dimensions of human experience that cultivate depth, introspection, and authenticity. The absence of constant external mirrors has forced the development of an inner landscape, rich with self-knowledge, creativity, and emotional clarity. There is a kind of quiet mastery in learning to inhabit one's own company fully, to observe the social world with acuity while remaining centered within oneself. Connection, when it arises, is approached with a newfound wisdom. The individual can discern authenticity, honor boundaries, and engage without surrendering identity. They can appreciate the subtlety of presence, the comfort of shared silence, the resonance of mutual understanding. In this space, the paradox of solitude and companionship resolves not by erasing difference, but by embracing it. Friendlessness becomes one chapter in a larger story of human experience, one that holds both challenge and beauty, absence and possibility. In the end, the psychology of people who have no friends is a testament to resilience and introspection. It reminds us that human connection is both fragile and profound, and that the depth of the inner world is a resource of immeasurable value. Solitude, reflection, and careful engagement converge, illuminating a path where isolation does not define worth but cultivates it.